A man walked into one of the most expensive restaurants in New York City. His clothes were simple. His hands were rough. And the moment he stepped through those golden doors, a waiter blocked his path. "Sir," the waiter said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "this isn't the kind of place for someone like you." The man said nothing. He just looked at the waiter with calm, steady eyes. But 10 minutes later, that same waiter was standing in the corner, pale as a ghost, trying to figure out how his entire career had just collapsed in front of him. Because the man he just turned away, that was Sammy the Bull Gravano, the most feared informant in American mafia history, whose testimony brought down John Gotti himself. And this waiter had no idea who he was messing with. If you've never heard this story, you're going to want to watch every single second. And before we dive in, to understand what happened that evening, you first have to understand who Salvatore, Sammy the Bull Gravano, really was. Sammy wasn't just another name in the mob. He was the underboss of the Gambino crime family, the second most powerful position in one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in American history. For decades, he operated in the shadows of New York's underworld, feared by enemies and respected by allies. He admitted to being involved in 19 murders. He was the kind of man that other dangerous men were careful around. But everything changed in 1991, when John Gotti, the so-called Teflon Don, was arrested. Sammy made a decision that shocked the entire country. He flipped. He became a government witness, testifying against his own boss. His testimony was so detailed, so damaging, that Gotti was sentenced to life in prison. Sammy, in return, received a reduced sentence and was eventually placed in witness protection. By the time this restaurant story took place, Sammy had been living a quieter life. He wasn't the underboss anymore. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards and black SUVs. He was just a man, older now, walking around in everyday clothes, trying to live something resembling a normal life. He'd walked into this particular restaurant in Manhattan because someone had recommended it. It was the kind of place where the tablecloths were white, the lighting was soft, and the prices were printed without dollar signs, because if you had to ask, you probably didn't belong there. Sammy didn't look like he belonged there. And that's exactly where the waiter made his terrible mistake. The waiter's name isn't something that history recorded kindly, but his actions, those were remembered by everyone in that room. When Sammy walked in, the waiter took one look at him. The plain jacket, the worn shoes, the quiet way he carried himself, and made a snap judgment. This man didn't look rich. He didn't look powerful. He didn't look like the kind of customer who would order a $400 bottle of wine or tip generously. "I'm sorry, sir," the waiter said, stepping in front of him with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having been truly humiliated. "We have a dress code here, and quite frankly, we're fully booked for the evening." Sammy looked around. There were empty tables, several of them. He said nothing for a moment, just looked at the waiter, then looked at the empty tables, then looked back at the waiter. "I just want to eat dinner," Sammy said quietly. The waiter smiled, kind of smile that isn't really a smile at all. "Perhaps try somewhere down the street. This establishment caters to a more specific clientele." Now, here's the thing about Sammy Gravano that most people don't understand. After everything he'd been through, the mob, the trials, the years in witness protection, he had developed a kind of patience that most people never learn. He didn't explode. He didn't threaten. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply nodded, turned around, and walked back outside. The waiter watched him go with a self-satisfied look, straightened his jacket, and went back to attending to his tables. He probably forgot about it within minutes. The other staff noticed, though. A young hostess near the entrance had watched the whole thing. She'd recognized the man the moment he walked in. She'd seen documentaries. She'd read the news stories. She knew exactly who Sammy Gravano was. She watched her colleague dismiss him, and she felt her stomach drop. Meanwhile, a few tables away, a regular customer, a well-known New York businessman, had also recognized Sammy. He stood up, walked to the door, and caught up with Sammy on the sidewalk. "Sammy," he said, "I saw what happened. Come back inside with me." Sammy looked at him for a moment. Then, with a small shrug, he agreed. They walked back in together. And this time, the entire atmosphere of the restaurant shifted. The businessman was known there. He was a big spender, a regular, someone the management genuinely valued. When he walked in with Sammy at his side and asked to speak with the manager personally, the staff scrambled. The manager came out within 90 seconds, and the businessman explained, calmly and clearly, exactly who had just been turned away from his restaurant. He explained who Sammy the Bull was. He explained the history. He explained the significance. The color drained from the manager's face. He turned to look at the waiter. The waiter, for the first time that evening, began to understand that he had made a catastrophic error in judgment. What happened next moved faster than the waiter could process. The manager walked over to him immediately, pulled him aside, and had a conversation that the other staff could see, but not quite hear. Whatever was said, the results were visible on the waiter's face. The confidence was gone. The self-satisfaction had evaporated. What was left was something closer to panic. Sammy, meanwhile, sat down at one of those empty tables, the ones that apparently didn't exist when he first walked in. The businessman sat across from him. They ordered food, wine, and the staff waited on them with the kind of attention usually reserved for celebrities and politicians. The news of what had happened spread through the restaurant like electricity through a wire. Other customers began to whisper. Staff members glanced between the table where Sammy sat and the corner where the waiter stood, visibly shaken. See, New York has a particular way of handling moments like these. The city has a long memory, and in certain circles, business circles, media circles, and especially the circles that had followed the Gotti trials closely, Sammy Gravano wasn't just a name. He was a legend, a complicated, controversial, deeply serious legend. The waiter had treated a legend like a stranger who wandered in off the street, and now everyone in the room knew it. But here's the part of this story that separates it from a simple tale of karma. Sammy didn't demand an apology. He didn't make a scene. He didn't ask for the waiter to be fired. He simply ate his dinner, talked with his friend, and treated the evening like any other. It was everyone around him who couldn't let it go. The manager issued a formal apology at the table, which Sammy accepted with a nod. Other customers stopped by to pay their respects, a phrase that means something very specific in New York, especially when said to a man with Sammy's history. And the waiter? He spent the rest of that shift in a kind of shell-shocked silence, replaying his choices from the beginning of the evening and understanding, fully and clearly, that he had not just embarrassed himself. He had embarrassed his establishment in front of people who would not forget. That's the twist that nobody expects. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't a movie moment. The punishment was something quieter and, in many ways, more lasting. The absolute, total, public exposure of his own arrogance. In a room full of New York's most connected people, he had revealed exactly who he was. And everyone saw it. There's an old saying that gets passed around so much it almost loses its meaning. Never judge a book by its cover. But what Sammy the Bull's restaurant story actually teaches us goes much deeper than that. It teaches us that the most powerful people in any room are rarely the ones who look the most powerful. Real strength, the kind that comes from having survived extraordinary things, from having faced consequences most of us will never imagine, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. Sammy Gravano walked into that restaurant in simple clothes because he didn't need to dress to impress anyone. He had already lived a life that most people couldn't comprehend. He had already sat across from federal prosecutors, testified in the most watched mob trial in American history, and survived things that would have broken anyone else. He didn't need a designer suit to prove who he was. He knew who he was. The waiter, on the other hand, was using his position, a borrowed authority over who entered and who didn't, to feel powerful. He saw a man who looked ordinary and decided that ordinary wasn't welcome. He confused appearance with worth and status symbols with actual substance. It's a mistake that people make every single day, in every kind of environment, in offices, in schools, in neighborhoods. We size people up by how they look, what they wear, what car they drive, and we treat them accordingly. Sometimes we get lucky and our assumptions don't hurt anyone. But sometimes the person we dismiss is exactly the person we should have been listening to. And sometimes the consequences of that dismissal follow us a long time. The businessman who recognized Sammy and went out to bring him back in, he understood something that the waiter didn't. He understood that respect isn't only owed to people who look impressive. It's owed to everyone, and the failure to give it can reveal far more about your own character than it ever reveals about the person you're judging. Sammy the Bull sat in that restaurant and ate his dinner. He was gracious. He was calm. He didn't use the moment to humiliate or threaten. He simply let the evening unfold and let the truth do what truth always eventually does. It came out. So the next time you find yourself making a snap judgment about someone based on how they look, how they dress, or where they come from, pause. Ask yourself what you might be missing. Ask yourself what story might be written on that person that you haven't bothered to read yet. Because in this world, the most interesting chapters are often hidden behind the most ordinary covers. If this story made you think, if it reminded you of a time when someone underestimated you, or when you realized you had underestimated someone else, drop it in the comments below. We read every single one of them. We'll see you in the next one.